Good evening, my friends. Thank you for taking the time to join me again. Today, I'm going to go over some informational fact things that I've gathered from different sources and from what I just know from years of experience, and talk a little bit about All Saints and All Souls Days. And I'm hoping it might help you sleep and you can drift away thinking about these things. And then at the end, maybe we'll talk a little bit about some saints. So, I'm sure many of you know, in fact most of you if not all, know that Halloween is a modern version of All Hallows Eve, or Halloween with the apostrophe. And on it, in a lot of cultures, we have trick-or-treating and we dress up and we do some spooky things. But it's often associated with All Saints Day the next day and All Souls Day the day after that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how all these relate and go over them. And like I said, a lot of this is years of education and knowledge, but I also pulled some information that I compiled from Catholic.org, from CatholicCulture.com, and from CatholicEducation.com, as well as, things I read on the Vatican website and the USCCB website. So, a range of inputs here. Anyway, long ago in Ireland and Britain, not sure how long ago, but I think we can safely assume quite BC. Just kidding. Long ago in Ireland and Britain, Christians would come together on All Hallows Eve to ask for God's blessing and protection from the evil in the world. The source of the modern celebrations stemmed from the donning of saintly and evil spirit costumes to act out the battle between good and evil. So that's where one source says we get the idea for trick-or-treating. But so talking about All Saints, which comes on November 1st, it of course celebrates all the saints. There are saints who have their own special days in the church. There are some we even celebrate twice or more than twice, like of course the Blessed Mother, and then like John the Baptist. When that happens, usually it'll be on a birthday and a day of death. But there are so many saints that there's not a day always just for them, or they will have a shared day with another saint, and so you might only celebrate one or the other. So this is a way to celebrate all the saints, just everyone who's with us in the communion of saints. And it's great because it can give us inspiration. Sainthood is being with God forever in heaven, and it's what we aspire to achieve. So, getting a little more on that. The church at Antioch, or of Antioch, kept a commemoration of all holy martyrs on the first Sunday after Pentecost for a long time. And in the course of the succeeding centuries, the feast spread through the whole Eastern Church, and by the 7th century was everywhere kept as a public holy day. And as I talk about this next part and read some of this next part down here, I'm giving some vague dates because, as always when we're talking about time so long ago, exact dates can be a little tricky and there can be disagreements among sources. So, in the West, the Feast of All Holy Martyrs was introduced in the early 600s by Pope Boniface IV. connected to dedication of a pagan temple to Mary on May 13th. So there was a pagan temple, and then they dedicated to Mary. On this date, the feast was then annually held in Rome. So that was May 13th. 200 years later, in the mid-800s, Gregory IV, who was Pope, transferred the celebration to November 1st. Now, there's a lot of debate about why it was moved to November 1st. And then some people have claimed that it was a sign then to substitute a Christian feast for significance for the pagan. And rumors like that or reasons like that come up all the time when people, they can find a reason to make something not as good or normal as it is. But even in the Catholic Church, most things are done for quite prosaic reasons. So the reason for the transfer was that the many pilgrims who came to Rome for the feast could be fed more easily after the harvest than in the spring, and so it was moved from May to November. As all this was going on, it says the practice had spread of including in this memorial not only all the martyrs, but all the other saints. And Pope Gregory III in the mid-7th century, so right before Pope Gregory in the 800s, had already stated this when he dedicated a chapel in St. Peter's in honor of Christ, Mary, and all the apostles, martyrs, confessors, and all the just and perfect servants of God, whose bodies rest through the whole world. Let's find another interesting part to talk about. So, around the mid-700s, they recorded the celebration of All Saints' Day on November 1st in England, and such a celebration also existed in Austria. So basically, by the mid-800s, pretty much the church in all the areas seems to have been putting the Feast of All Saints on the liturgical calendar on November 1st. Around 840 or so, the Emperor Louis the Pious introduced the Feast of All Saints in his territories. And with the consent of bishops in Germany and France, he ordered it to be kept on November 1st in the whole empire. And then it says in the late 1400s, right? So the 1400 was something like 800 years after the first date we talked about. And it was 600 years ago, 600 years ago from now, not quite. But that's how long this has been going on. Pope Sixtus IV established it as a holy day of obligation for the entire Latin Church. And that's what we have today. It's still like that today. So I'm going to read a liturgical prayer now. Almighty and eternal God, who hast granted us to venerate the merits of all thy saints in one celebration, we beg thee to bestow upon us the desired abundance of thy mercy on account of this great number of intercessors. Alright, let's get a little paper sound here. So, All Souls' Day is celebrated the next day on November 2nd, and it is not a holy day in the church. There's no requirements for that day, but on it we should pray for the ones in purgatory, pray for all the souls in purgatory, and I always make a note to pray for the souls who have no one to pray for them. So in my church, in my current parish, we especially mark anyone who's died in the last year. So people bring photos and can set them up there. But it's for anybody. And these are where festivals like Dia de los Muertos, which I think is the most famous, comes from. And they're similar. These really should be days of festivity, not sadness. Though of course it's hard. That's really hard when a death is fresh. But it's such a good day to go to the cemetery, make sure grave sites are looking good, and generally just mark that the dead are not gone forever. It's All Saints Day and All Souls Day are days of such hope and happiness, because we know that death isn't the end, right? It's just a different phase of things, and we can look forward to, well, one, that we're still connected with everyone in Christ. That doesn't end. And then of course will be more so later down the road. So the church has consistently encouraged the offering of prayers and Mass for the souls of the faithful departed in purgatory. At the end of their death, these souls are not perfectly cleansed of venial sin, or have not atoned for past transgressions, and thereby are deprived of the beatific vision. The faithful on earth can assist these souls in purgatory in attaining the beatific vision through their prayers, good works, and the offering of Mass. So that's straight from CatholicEducation.com. And that vision they talk about, that means being with God, seeing God. It means not fully in His presence. And now direct from CatholicCulture.com. The need and duty of prayer for the departed souls has been acknowledged by the Church at all times. It is recommended in the scriptures of the Old Testament, in Maccabees, and found expression not only in public and private prayers, but especially in the offering of the holy sacrifice for the repose of souls. In the early days of the Church, the names of faithful departed were posted in the church so that the community would remember them in prayer. And as I said, that's still something that's pretty common today. You'll remember them at different Masses. This was held actually on different days at different times. In the 600s in Spain, Saint Isidore, I believe is how it's pronounced, attested to a celebration on the second Sunday before Lent. And then in the late 900s, it's so worried to say, a 3-digit year. The Abbot of Corvey in Germany recorded a special ceremony for the faithful departed on October 1st. And then in 1048, the Abbot of Cluny decreed for all the Cluniac monasteries that special prayers be offered and the office of the dead sung for all the souls in purgatory on November 2nd, the day after All Saint. The Benedictines and Carthusians adopted that same devotion, and from the 11th to the 14th century, it gradually spread in France, Germany, England, and Spain, until finally in the 14th century, Rome placed the day of commemoration of all the faithful departed in the official books of the Western Church for November 2nd or November 3rd, if it falls on a Sunday. And I'll say that is very common. The sacrifice of the regular Mass, the Sunday celebration, the keeping the holy, the Lord's Day, always trumps holidays, except like Christmas. If there's a holy day, then it would move to the next day, to a Monday, whenever it would fall on a Sunday, because we always, of course, God is first. It's really, to me, it's a natural fit for All Souls to follow All Saints. It's that communion of saints. A lot of customs have come up over the years because it's so important. We all know when we lose someone, the love doesn't die, right? Love, the soul keeps going and the love keeps going. And so this knowledge of being connected is so powerful. And then during World War I, Pope Benedict XV realized that the masses being said for all the war dead, it couldn't be done. There were so many people. And so priests can offer 3 masses on All Souls Day. One for the particular intention, one for all the faithful departed, and one for the intentions of the Holy Father. So, when All Souls Days came this week, I call the people I know who've lost someone recently, and I tell them that I'm praying for their loved ones. And sometimes I text, but I think it brings people comfort because they haven't forgotten. They know they lost somebody this year, and it's nice to know someone's praying and remembers them. Even people I know who aren't Catholic or aren't practicing, I'll do it. And let them know they're remembered and I care. And I don't visit any graves on All Saints or All Souls Day because I don't live near anyone that I've lost. But whenever I go back to my hometown, I go out to where my grandparents, I don't know what we'd call it, it's not exactly buried, they were cremated, but where they rest, that would be the right term, where they rest. And I make sure it's looking pretty, and I sit there and pray for a little bit, and I bring flowers, though, because of how it works, where they're in a veteran cemetery. It's not actually, it's like 30 minutes from where I grew up, but they used to have these holders and you could leave flowers in them, but they didn't have them the last time I went, so I'll have to find out because I don't, want to just leave something sitting there and someone has to clean it up. It just becomes a chore for someone. And I do just, want to reiterate, because I know this can be a difficult topic for people, but death isn't the end of everything. That love keeps going. And we see that through examples of the canonized saints, though I think many of us probably have our own stories that we know of loved ones and non-canonized saints with I don't want to say encounters, I don't want to make this get weird, but stories we could tell that are explained best through this continuation of life. So, let me talk about some of these saints here. And except for Saint Rita, these aren't necessarily my favorite saints, but they were ones that I had handy, if that makes sense. And they're great too, so we can talk about them. But before I do, and I'll mention this again at the end as well, this week I went and saw the new Mother Teresa biography. It played on All Souls Day, now that I think about it, and then it's playing again on the 7th of November, and then it's one of those special Fathom events that you go to movie theaters, and I really enjoyed it. It has footage of Mother Teresa working, and you get to hear from her and things that she said in cameras over time, and then you hear from the people who worked directly with her and what it was like. So if you have a chance, I don't think you could go wrong, and I'll put a link. Did I do that right? Never tried to do that before. I will try to remember to put the link to the website if you're interested in more about it. But so if we go through these now. So this is Pope John Paul II. He is another modern day saint like Mother Teresa. He was the Pope, from when I was born and most of my life, I guess, or maybe not most anymore, but anyway, he had to go through a lot of stuff, physical ailments and being shot and, having to make decisions about if he cooperated with evil forces or let other people get hurt or die from him. When the Nazis learned that they couldn't make him do things by threatening or hurting him, they started to injure and attack other priests or other people. These are all things that he had to deal with. So that's a picture of him, and on the back there's a prayer. This is when he was only blessed, but he's a saint now. And then this is Saint Rita, who is one of my favorite saints. So she's the saint of the impossible. And if you're familiar at all, you might think of Saint Jude as the saint of the impossible, and he is one as well. Saint Jude was a cousin or relative of some sort of Jesus, our Lord, and one of the apostles, and he is also known as the saint of the impossible. He does sort of outrageous miracles. And if you're familiar with St. Jude, the Children's Hospital, that's where that came from, I believe. But Saint Rita, also saint of the impossible, she lived in the 1200s in Italy, and her life, part of why I like her, she's so strong, right? And she went through a lot, and I feel like there's a lot of struggles that people have that they could relate to her. But she wanted to consecrate herself to God and enter a convent, and her parents said no and made her marry, and they married her to this horrible man who was abusive and I'm sure unfaithful and unkind and violent, and eventually he was killed, and they believe though that he repented before that happened. And then she had 2 sons, and of course they wanted to go have revenge on their father's killers and become murderers themselves. And so Saint Rita prayed that wouldn't happen. And I'm sorry I said the 1200s, but it's actually the late 1300s and into the 1400s. She prayed that wouldn't happen. She prayed for their conversion, and they too are said to have to died prepared for God rather than murder them. But so she lost her husband, maybe not so bad, but she lost her 2 sons, which I would imagine, no matter how awful they are, would be hard. And so then she tried to enter a convent again, right? So we go through all this, is obedient, it doesn't get bitter, stays, stays holy, goes to enter the convent, and they tell her no, right? So if you've ever been told no or rejected, I would imagine she has a pretty good idea how that feels. And then she finally gets in, and what happens? She gets the stigmata. And if you're not familiar with the stigmata, it's essentially a wound of Christ. So she has it in the head, like a crown of thorns. But so then she suffers with that and some other physical ailments for a long time, and then she died. So yeah, the lady could deal with a lot. She was one tough person, and I love courage and toughness and perseverance, and I feel like most of the struggles you have, or at least quite a few of them, she could understand, so you can bring them to her. And then along the lines of her great qualities, another saint I really admire is Saint Veronica, and she is the one who wiped Jesus' face when he was walking up to Calvary. It sounds so simple, and of course simple things done with great love are what most of us are called to do, not great things. So I think that proved it. But then in addition to that, you have the courage that it took to do that. Jesus was being guarded by people who killed Veronica's people regularly. They were killing 3 of them right there in front of her. It was so terrifying that people scattered instead of staying with God, right? That's how terrifying it was. And she was willing to just flaunt them and walk out there and do this. And so while the act itself, wiping a face, might sound simple, just the courage and the strength is huge. And I admire that so much. And then another, of course, brave and dignified woman is the Blessed Virgin. And I won't go into this one too much because there are a lot better resources out there than me on the Blessed Virgin, and whether you're Catholic or not, it might be the one you're most familiar with. Now these two are St. Vincent de Paul and the Blessed Frederick Ozanam, and they are people that we honor in the St. Vincent de Paul Society. So I'm a member of this society, and it is fantastic. Its main purpose is to help each other grow in fellowship, and then through that, of course, there's so much service. It's outreach to the poor. So probably wherever you live, unless it's somewhere very small, you have some sort of St. Vincent contingent near you who does work with the homeless or with other people who need things. In some dioceses I've been in, the whole area together runs like a large, sort of shelter or soup kitchen, something like that. In other places, like the one I'm in now, because I live in quite a large area, or well-populated area, the parishes have their own councils. And so at my parish, I have to tell you, our people are fantastic, and we do so many things. We do a huge Christmas event where we give you a Christmas meal and food for the next month, and toys and clothing, and you just drive through and we load it in your car. We get your quote-unquote orders ahead of time, and we learn, I say we, this is really people before me, but they used to give a turkey and a ham for Christmas, and we learned over time that many people in straitened means don't have a place for a turkey. It's too big for what they can cook in, and so we changed it to 2 chickens. So things like that. I was going to maybe talk more about that in this video, but now that I'm thinking about it, I think what I'll do instead is make a video about the St. Vincent de Paul Society and what our place does in particular, because I gotta tell you, it's great. Like, I think it'll make you happy to hear about. But anyway, that's who these guys are. And this is our rule. You might be able to look it up online, I don't know. I've never tried because I have this book. And then this obviously isn't the picture of a saint, but this is tied to St. Ignatius Loyola, and these are the spiritual exercises. So really, you can do this on your own, but it's great if you can do it with a group or with a guided retreat. But I encourage you, if you get a chance, to check it out. It takes a lot of discipline to do this. It's a lot of very formatted praying and a lot of meditative prayer, which can sometimes feel like doing nothing. Sometimes people struggle with it. But interesting. We could read some of this if anybody's interested. Let me know. And then my bookmark in this, it was a couple years ago I did it. I'm not doing it now, so this is just in there. But there's Pope Francis, and he's not a saint because he's still the Pope, but he's in the communion of saints like all of us, striving to follow the Lord. But He's not canonized. So anyway, that was just a little bit of fun and history. Some of my own rambling thoughts. I hope you get a chance to check out that movie. Let me know if you do. It's about 2 hours long, so be ready. But really well done. Excellent production quality. Make some paper sounds here at the end. I would ask for those of you who pray. I would ask it of everyone, but if you don't pray, probably a strange request. The 2 priests at my parish, both are experiencing some pretty severe health problems at the same time. One of them, and he's actually retired, he's in his 80s, but he's super active. He does a lot. He's at our parish all the time. He's the kind of priest who, if he says Mass, will get there early and hear confessions, whether they're scheduled or not. He has been very, very active in prison ministry. So he goes out to the big federal prisons, works with people out there. So he had a bad reaction to his heart medication and is really struggling. And so he's not going to be able to help at the church for a while, which is quite bad timing because our pastor was just diagnosed with cancer, and it's cancer in his head. So it's interesting. It's not brain cancer, but they are concerned that it might spread. So he has to go through some very severe, intense chemotherapy and radiation. And, he wants to make sure he can continue to be a priest. He obviously, has a lot of those cancer feelings that people have. So if you have a moment to pray, that'd be great. And if you have anything you would like me to pray for, as always, you can leave a comment down below, and I'll be happy to. Though I will say I pretty much pray for you guys all the time anyway. For anybody who watches, sometimes for people to watch. Just kidding. I don't think I ever actually pray for that. I actually don't think I ever have. That was just a joke. But I do thank God for you, and I am grateful, and I do hope things are going well, and pray that He keeps you safe on a regular basis. And so with that, I think we can close this out. Thank you so much.